right. Anyway, so apologies about that. Our last scheduled event was wiped out by the tropical storm. That seemed like it was going to be a hurricane, so just for safety reasons, we canceled that. And then our speaker was only available next year, so that's now on February 1st?
February 1st, yeah.
Yeah, February 1st. But yeah, we're excited today to bring you Connor Tumbleson's talk on hacking Halo through Xbox, or vice versa. And we also have some other exciting things to announce as well, so let's dig right into the agenda. So if you've not been to a Tampa Devs event before, I promise we're much larger, as you can see. But we're basically a community of software developers in the Tampa Bay area looking to grow together. And we do a variety of technical presentations, social mixers, etc., to facilitate that, all completely free. There's no cost associated with your membership. So do we have a quick seat or no?
Yeah, I don't know what the link is. I need to go grab it.
All right. I'm just going to continue that until he's got that
Okay.
ready.
I'm going to go just look for the link. Right
So while we're figuring that out, let's talk a bit about our last event in late November. We had TAD Hack Tampa 2022. This was fantastic. Yeah, so if you went to this, I know Mike went, me and a couple other people, you went. Yeah. So if you want to check out the results, you can go to this QR code. We had 120 people show up,
Hey, wait, we have
12 different teams.
we have a YouTube link of it too.
Yeah, it's up here.
Wait.
We had 12 teams make different projects, and we distributed like $1,500 worth of prizes. It was amazing. Now, we have some upcoming events as well. So our next meeting will be on December 7th. It will be about data ETL with Apache Airflow. And then, in addition to that, on the 14th, we're part of the Tech Meetup Extravaganza with Computer Coach and High Tech Connect. There were some other great tech meetups in the local area as well. And now I'd like to invite Mike up for a few minutes to talk about Tampa Bay Data Science, which is a data science group that we're partnering with to kind of do some of the same things that Tampa Devs does, just with data science. Here you go.
Thank you. Thank you, Charlton. Hello, everybody. Good to be here. They were nice enough to ask me to address you guys, and I get to announce our new logo, which may look vaguely familiar. And so Vincent asked me a few weeks ago if I wanted a logo. Actually, he knew I did because of it actually started with the Tech Extravaganza coming up. And once I asked about it, she was like, yeah, feel free to put your logo on the announcement and announce it to your group. So the data science group is also going to be part of the Tech Extravaganza. And I said, I guess I need a logo now. So Vincent said, you want a logo? And we played around with a couple of different kinds of logos. And this one actually won at my last data science meetup. So that was fortunate. So there's the new Tampa Data Science Group logo. And I want to give a round of applause for Vincent. And we have, it's a meetup group for data science. I guess the only thing more than that I can say is that we kind of define it pretty broadly. We try to attract professionals, but we sometimes have higher level talks that sort of anyone with general knowledge would appreciate. We also sometimes manage to pull off like a group project. Right before the pandemic, we got something kind of like a long-term hackathon over a few months, testing something out. You want to go to the next slide? Yep. Because those of you that either just went to that link for the hackathon or were at the hackathon, especially if you were on my team, which is going to be really boring, but our idea for the hackathon was to try and create an app to help sponsors find meetup groups that need sponsoring and vice versa. So we called it Sponsor Up. And Mike worked out a Tinder-style swipe left or swipe right if you like this. If you're a sponsor looking for a group, you kind of flip through a bunch of meetup groups in the area, and the groups can do the same thing, and if you have matching interests or needs, then you can make a connection. But part of that, I thought, would be to actually look at what's there to begin with. So I worked on essentially scraping the meetup site group descriptions. And this word salad here is kind of as far as I got, which is good enough, because that was basically being able to access the, not quite an API, but to do the call to the server to get it to return the group descriptions for, centered on the center of Tampa for a certain mile radius. And the reason I'm mentioning this is that I want to invite anybody that thinks that might be an interesting project to work on to join us in the effort. And part of it is that this is just sort of an inherently useful idea. It's a little bit half-baked, I admit, but like Vincent paid for the food out of his own pocket. So he's not going to beg. I would too. We should just make donations at some point. But if, imagine if we had a way, and now, I'm not even sure it needs to be an app right away, but that would be nice, that we could show to potential sponsors, because they'll have usually a narrow niche of groups that they would like to sponsor. And there's, everything from sewing groups, hiking groups, tech groups. If we could give kind of a fine-grained analysis, a little better than Meetup does, and maybe through the API you get even more information, like how big the group is, how active they are. So if you're interested in maybe pitching in on a project like that could really help the community, let me know. I think,
Jason,
which way?
are you trying to go forward with that?
I was going to try and go back to my email address. There it is. Oop, too many. I guess we never did get it.
That's okay.
But data science group, find us, come be a part of that. If you have any data science talks, if you guys are any of you are data scientists that would like to give a talk, by all means let me know. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Mike. Well, we're super excited to see the data science group grow, and it's our first time that we've partnered with some other groups in the area, so this will be great. Now next, we're starting our end of 2022 survey, so if you guys have some feedback for us, make sure that you visit this URL. We'll be blasting this out on every single channel we have so that we can make 2023 even better. And also, if you're interested in speaking at one of our events, send us an email at speakers@tampadevs.com. We would love to host your talk. Now, some other updates. So first and foremost, if you're not already in the Slack, make sure that you join this Slack. You can go to go.tampa.dev/Slack to get the invitation. And another small detail about the Slack is we do get a few spam reports here and there now that we're kind of growing. So if you see something in the Slack that looks a little spammy, just let Vincent and I know. We'll take care of that immediately. Now next up, we have some exciting announcements about merch. So, I'm wearing a cool Tampa Devs shirt. Vincent's wearing a cool Tampa Devs shirt. Mari's wearing a cool Tampa Devs shirt. And we get a lot of people asking us questions like, where can we get these shirts? And until now, we haven't had an answer. So we're very pleased to announce the Tampa Devs store. This is just a regular Shopify store. If you go to store.tampa.dev, it looks like this. And you can use the code TDHolidays to get 10% off of your shirt order through December 31st. So we're really pleased to finally actually have a place where we can offer shirts and things. And again, for us being a nonprofit, this is super helpful in supporting the different things that we do. Because we don't have a way to make chicken appear for free. That would be pretty cool. Definitely, we'll put that one on the books. But until that time, we do have shirts for sale.
I don't think there's an app for that.
No, not quite yet. Now, the other thing that we get a lot of chatter about, both from our membership and from various organizations that partner with us to support us, is if they're looking for jobs or they're looking for people to hire for jobs. And this is something we've paid a lot of special attention to because one of our KPIs, if you will, as an organization is how many people have we helped in their career, whether that's finding a job or going through some kind of career transition into the technology space. So I'm very, very pleased to announce the official Tampa Devs job board, which is at jobs.tampa.dev. So we have a lot of folks that are in our group that are looking for jobs. We want to make that as easy as possible. So there's the site itself, right, where you can just go here and actually see this giant list. But in addition to that, every single posting on the site is syndicated to Twitter, it is syndicated to Slack, and there's also an email newsletter you can sign up for if you want job alerts delivered to your inbox. And yeah, you click on one of these roles and it'll come up with the job title and the job rec, and you can hit the apply now button. It'll take you right over to send that application in. And then, we just want to bring that to you to make it as easy as possible if you're just passively trying to search for jobs. So this is what a digest looks like in our Slack. You've got the role title, the compensation, the apply now button. This is posted every morning anytime there's new roles that appear on the board in our job listings channel. And same thing happens on the @Tampa Dev Jobs on Twitter, right there. But of course, being developers, it wouldn't just be complete with a web page, so we have a couple extra goodies. There's an embeddable widget, so if you want to, throw that on your site, there's a bunch of configurable parameters there. And we also have an API, so if you want to build your own integrations with our job board, maybe you want to, have something where it's like, anytime there's a role with a particular keyword, it'll spit it out as a JSON and give it to you. So we're very proud of this. We work very hard.
That was all Charlton.
Yeah, it was all. So what does this cost? So LinkedIn is very expensive and very complicated. So if you're a recruiter, you're a company trying to get a role out in front of a bunch of developers, LinkedIn, you have to have a daily budget, and you have to think about the number of job post views and pay-per-click and so on. And it sucks. It's really complex. And there are companies that spend tens of thousands of dollars that we've talked to, even in the local area, that spend just a lot of money on LinkedIn, tens of thousands of dollars.
Spend $1 million a
Yeah.
year.
One of them spends $1 million a year on LinkedIn licenses. Same thing with Dice. I mean, you post a single job to Dice, it costs you $500. That's completely ridiculous. And let's look at a smaller scale example. This is madeintampa.io, and you have to subscribe to a $20 a month subscription to be able to post 2 jobs at once. This is ridiculous. So we're not doing any of that. We have a very, very simple and straightforward pricing model. If you want to post a job up there for 14 days, you just give us $1, or you can email me or Vincent. We'll put it up there for free. We just want to aggregate jobs. If you want to do something that's promoted or featured for a longer period of time, then it's $25 or $50, and again, that just equates to a donation for our org. And then over time, we have all these great integrations that we've built, and we'll continue to expand that and hook it into partner organizations, Slacks, and so on, so the reach will expand. But we're super stoked with the reception. We get a lot of traffic on this board, and we haven't even really promoted it too much yet. So yeah, hopefully that's a great resource for our members. Here's all our social media, if you'd like to connect with us there. And without further ado, I'd like to
go back to the.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, let's do a Quixie quiz.
Oh wait, no, but there's also the hackathon YouTube video.
It's not in the Slack. So I'm going to turn it over to Hari so he can do this
Play the video
little
first,
Quixie
actually.
thing. Is that in the deck?
It's right there.
Oh. So here, we'll do a little victory lap about Tat Hacks first. This is we just got this in from our video guy who covered the event. This is proof that we're more than 15 people in a room.
Oh wait, is there no volume?
I don't know. I guess not.
Is there music?
Yeah, there's supposed to be music. I think there's supposed to be a setting that gets updated over on the corner. But you can see there's a bunch of people that are all working hard. That happened in this venue. So there was a $20,000 global prize pool, and then the local prize pool was it was no, it was $1,500.
That's $1,500.
Yeah, because the YubiKeys were another $250.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know if anybody in America won it?
I have no idea.
It was on
What
the
did-
blog
what did,
post. I think it was the Netherlands won it.
Yeah, the Netherlands won.
It was somewhere in Europe was most of the first, second, third place, but it's on the blog post too.
I can't say anything derogatory about the Dutch because my coworkers are Danish. But yeah, without further ado, let me turn it over to Hari to run this fun quiz game where you guys can win a free shirt. There you go.
Thank you, Charlton. Now, this is one of your first rewards for coming here today. You have this competition, bot 1/3.
That's weird.
Oops, my bad.
Uh-oh.
Let's get back.
Oh, you go.
All right, there you go. 998-449.
Oh, there we go.
It doesn't need a match with it.
Oh, it's just I'm late now.
First play, 2, 3.
Getting zero place.
Oh, this is something last time. How do you get from customize your character to actually play? What is it?
I'll give it half a minute and then we will start. 11.
How do you enter your name?
Hopefully with your fingers on the keyboard.
And then you're just doing it. It says her name.
Oh, it says that name's already taken.
Are we all set up? 16.
It's about everything. On the sound.
They have you back.
Alright, I'll go in a few seconds. Alright. We should the following as a correct syntax to print a page using JavaScript. Browser.print, navigator.print, window.print, document.print. 10 seconds. Jose got it first. Which one of the following prerequisites do you need on your OS before you install Git? Nothing. Jakarta Enterprise Edition. Java Development Kit 1.8 or newer. Python 3.1 or higher. 5 seconds left. And the correct answer is nothing. It barely has any prerequisites except for a compatible operating system. Jose again.
Where's Jose at? You? Fantastic. So Jose and Connor. Well, Connor, you're already going to get a shirt for being a speaker. So we'll say, or wait, no, it's not done.
No, this is just the first thing.
Console.log, and then in parentheses, 3 is larger than 2, 2 is larger than 1, and strong equal to false. What is the expected outcome? Is it false, undefined, true, can't run because of syntax error? It's gone 10 seconds. The answer is true. And the reason for that is because they're processed in order. So 3 is larger than 1, that is true. So true is converted into 1. 1 is not larger than 1. Jose and Connor. What is the command to get the current status of the Git repository? Get double dash status, get status, get status, git config double dash info. Time's up. Let's see who we've got. Where are you, Jose? Using Bootstrap, you want your HTML element to take 50% of the total width when viewed on a large screen. Which class would you use? Class name is col-bub 1200 pixels. 50%. Col-large 50% or col-large 0.5 or col-large dash 6. Time's up. It's a .6 one because it uses a 12 grid system. So out of 12 columns, you got 6, half of them.
Oh, come on.
Under which circumstances should you use a single dash within the get command as opposed to a double dash? When it is followed with a quoted text message. 2. Double dash is usually used for status checking commands, while single dash is associated with editing and pushy changes or adding notes. Option number 3. There's no definite rule here. The double dash came with modern Git, while the single dash is legacy. Finally, when using a single character options. Fifteen seconds. And the correct answer is when using a single character options. All right. Let's go.
See how happy I am.
Yes, cool.
Right.
Alright. Well, thank you guys for participating. Thank you.
Yeah, so if you're J School or Michael B, go ahead to the back and we'll get you set up. The first place winner, you're going to get a shirt, and the second place winner, you get a $10 gift card for the merch store. So congrats. Okay, so now that we've had that fun diversion, let's go ahead and turn things over to the esteemed Connor Tumbleson so that he can tell us all about hacking Halo through Xbox 360. All right, it's all you. Here's your HDMI. In the corner, if you want. Let's get excited for it.
you, and that's amazing. It just pops up everywhere. I've never spoken here yet, and it's really cool to see all these screens everywhere. Okay, you guys can hear this? It's all good. Well, sweet. Well, hey guys, I've never been here before, to this meetup at least, but I've been to a bunch of other ones around Ybor, so it's really cool to meet all of you guys. Hope to kind of come back. And what I'm going to talk about today is a really cool thing in my nerd mind. It's just kind of like hacking Halo through 2 generations of consoles. So to kind of just like warm people up here, it's like, this Xbox is pretty old here. I don't imagine, maybe a few of you here know it, maybe all of you know it, I'm not sure. But what I think you wouldn't be surprised with is like, this console came out in 2001, which looking at now is like 20 years ago, which is pretty crazy. But if I popped up another one up here, like who knows what this one is? And this one, maybe someone does know, is just actually like the developer Xbox that came out like, roughly a year before the real one. The retail one comes out with everyone else, but the developers need to get their hands on one a bit early. And they get this cool little green one, which honestly I think looks a lot better than the real one. So now I can put a little curveball in here, because honestly, I don't think any of you guys would know this one. Because this one is a pretty crazy Xbox that came out like 5 years after the original, which was like called this crazy translucent ice blue Canadian edition for Halo 2. It's like, why? I don't know. I don't know why they did it. But then if we just like jumped into the kind of modern, I say modern, they're not really modern much anymore, but the Xbox 360. I'm sure a lot more people start recognizing the Xbox now as it kind of evolves. And that came out in 2005. But then if we take another jump, like who knows what this one is? And this is a kind of a tough one. Quality's not great, but it's tough to find these. This would be kind of like what the launch members on the Xbox team got when they released it. So it looks pretty cool. Honestly, all it had is like a little underglow. Not underglow, you know what I mean? This like little green part. But then what about this one? Jumping again. This one's kind of a much more sleek, modern 360, and it was actually called the Slim. I imagine because it got a bit slimmer and sleeker. And then to trick you all, just as anyone in here know what this one was called, it had a weird single letter name. Yeah, it was the E. So I'm not really sure what they started doing with their naming, but that was it. Okay, that was just a little warm up, so now we'll jump into it. So like, who am I? Why am I here? I've had the same alias, or just my online name, for I think 20-something years now. So it's All About Peaches. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't. That's fine. Been doing too many things. Like I started in Halo, and you're going to see why. I messed around with it a lot. That kind of led to like Xbox stuff. Unfortunately, like legal started getting in trouble, and I kind of moved out of that, and I went to Android. It's much more open source and friendly. And then I kind of just started securing web apps. So then it was kind of like PHP and web. So we'll just jump into an Xbox. And now you can see one with the lid off. It's pretty boring. But what did this thing have in it? It had like a really tiny Pentium 3 processor. It had what you would not even believe now, a pretty strange GeForce NVIDIA card. Which now if you think of a 3, I mean, I don't even know what they're selling now. Like 4090s, 6090s, or some crazy things. And if you look at the specs here, like what is this if you look back 20 years? 64 megs of RAM and an 8 gig hard drive. Like, that is pretty crazy. And you can see the drive here. It's on the right, and it's this little tiny IDE drive, and you can see it's 8 gigs of space. It's wonderful. Not sure why they hit space a zillion times. So here's my plan. We're going to kind of soft mod Xbox. We're going to hard mod one. We're going to mod Halo right after that. We're going to hard mod a 360 and then mod Halo again. It'll be pretty fun. But I said a lot of terms just now. I want to make sure everyone knows like what a soft mod is. And that is just that we can modify our Xbox with no real hardware interaction with it. And we can do this to kind of run unsigned code, do what we want. And I think that's just the industry term for a vulnerability, or shorten a button. Weird, but. So then like, what did you need? What you need to soft mod something? And you needed a game, like a type of game that could be affected by kind of a vulnerability, in some way to get like a modified game saved onto that game. Sorry, I'm messing with this audio up. Yeah, it's crazy. So I picked Splinter Cell. It's a pretty popular game that was used specifically for this purpose, and we're going to see why. Because what could you do? You could not really play the game, load the game, immediately save the game, take the save off your Xbox. Now you kind of just have a baseline. You could go in there and kind of just mess with one thing and do this over and over. Kind of just establish what changes in a save file. So then Xbox 20 years ago had this pretty cool idea to be like, how do we make game saves shareable? And they came up with two ideas, which is like a no roam and a roamable, which was like, hey, if you want to share your game saves with other people, you can. It's a roamable one. If you can't, it's a no roam, it's signed to your Xbox. Unfortunately, for Xbox, they really didn't keep those secured too well because it was incredibly easy to find the keys that they used as the constants for roamable saves. So you could make your own game saves. And that led to an explosion online of a tool that's called Action Replay. And this was just like a huge collection of game saves that some people programmatically made, some people just saved their own game saves, and that was just a mess of people cheating and having fun and buying a $25 adapter, which you can tell the interfaces back then were pretty crazy. Kind of looks like that old Winamp version or Windows Media Center, and looks pretty crazy. So what did people do as they're making game saves? Is they kind of just went in, as I mentioned, they just did one thing, did like nothing, then one thing. And the reason you're doing this is to see what changes in your game save, because then you programmatically can change those values to anything. And that allowed just an infinite amount of game saves for all these games. Campaign 100%, everything and everything. So then at this point, when people started realizing you can make game saves, some guy out in the community named Michael Robertson, and he was the owner of Windows, trying to run Linux on Windows. He was the owner of mp3.com. He was like, I'm gonna put up $100,000 and say, can someone chain one of these game saves to allow me to run Linux on my Xbox? Which 100,000 20 years ago, it's a pretty big bounty to put up on a random Xbox thing. And that attracted a lot of people to Xbox. Like, can we do this? Can we do this challenge? And this guy, and I don't know if you can tell from this far away in the screenshot here, we had a member called Xbox Habib, I don't know how to pronounce this, it's weird. But he had one post, and this was very strange. He posted on April Fool's Day, his first post ever, and because we're talking forums 20 years ago, these are people that your upload at that time is like 25 kilobytes to 1 meg. That's your range of what you're allowed to upload onto a forum. So this guy posts a URL like decoded to handle all the binary for post of an exploit. And people don't really believe him. Like, what is this guy doing? He posts this weird gibberish on the forum and he says, launch Splinter Cell with it. Everyone's laughing at him. They don't believe it. But if you were to look at that 007 little like attachment he put, it's very strange. Because if you looked at it, there's actually an image in it. And it doesn't make any sense. Because why would someone make a game save that had an image in it? And then I actually put the image, it's hiding up there in the top right. But that was the image that was in this exploit. Which is very strange, because let's kind of talk about, and as you're gonna see here, we're gonna start pretty basic, we're gonna ramp up really quickly here technical, and then we're gonna go pretty basic again. But what this guy had managed to do is find a buffer overflow in the game save. Because honestly, if you're allowed to title yourself, your save, your name, your character, a lot of companies back then didn't really put a lot of good checks on these. So yeah, my name might be Cap, but I'm telling you it's 255 characters. We're gonna overflow, underflow. Some tricks occurred here. So what did he do? He actually wrote code to decrypt his JPEG. The exploit was hiding in the image. So why did he do this? It's very odd. Why share an exploit that was incredibly difficult to find out how it worked? I imagine so because $100,000 was on the line. So he really hit this well. So then this guy somehow figured out how to disable kernel write protections. You want to do this because you want to basically run code and write to it. And one thing you have to remember, in the original Xbox, made a very big mistake with this, is all your games ran in kernel mode. So maybe that's a big jump too, but in your computer, normally it boots straight into kind of what user land, your user mode. Elevator permissions require kernel, system password, root, etc. But not the Xbox. The original Xbox was like, okay, game, you're running in kernel mode, which wasn't the smartest thing. So then with write permissions, just adapt the public key, make it factorable. Why do you do that? So you can run unsigned code. And at this point then, this little tiny game save that launched overflowed because it was named funny, ran exploit code, kind of took over the kernel and launched a modified file. But what was it? And that was like what I'm calling this like limbo state. We're in between worlds at this point. We've launched kind of like a modified file, and it's an installer that can just install things for us and take over an Xbox, make it soft modded. And at this point, we haven't touched our Xbox except put a game save on it. We haven't opened it up, we haven't touched any of it, and we just kind of effectively soft modded it by launching a game save, which is pretty crazy. Because now you could do crazy things like launch a modded dashboard. And this one looked pretty like the original, but it had more features, a lot more nerd stuff, like dumping out your disk space and temperature, things that no regular person would ever care to see. But yeah, you could look at it. But then what happened kind of when people were starting to experiment with all this homebrew stuff is another exploit came out. And this one was funny enough, it had a name. It was called Bert and Ernie. And this was a crazy exploit for two reasons. One, because like the other one that was so hidden and like difficult to understand, it was hiding between layers of encryption. This one was like, here's some comments, it's open, here's exactly how it works, and it told you everything. And it was so elegant. It had like a tiny file, Bert and Ernie, I think, as you can probably remember, I think they're Sesame Street characters. Like one small, one large, they're elegant. One came in as like a buffer overflow, and the other just spanned collisions, threads to cause a collision. And this is how it kind of worked. So this is big because now you had an open source kind of code set that allowed you to run code on a console. And this was big because now all these other games, the community was like, okay, this one has it, this one has it, this one has it. And they just kind of found all the effective games and kept writing soft mod saves to do it. Because honestly, how many people were buying the same Splinter Cell game? It was kind of good to have like a wide variety of games to pick from. So we kind of blew through that, but let's go take a slow down now with hard modding, because this is where it gets a bit interesting. Is now we want to open our Xbox. We kind of want to mess with it. And we're gonna probably bring in a mod chip here, solder some things, and see how it works. But why are we doing this? Why are we hard modding? Because if we hard mod, we can actually upgrade our hard drive and our RAM. Because honestly, an 8 gig hard drive, that's really small. How many games could you hold if you theoretically copied a game from disk to hard drive? Probably 1.5. Not that many. So it was really great to be able to upgrade a hard disk and put in maybe 500 gigabytes. It's pretty cool. And you can control your BIOS. And it was so much more error prone in case you messed up, because it was always there holding all information in its little chip, so you can't soft mod it and destroy it, kind of like some of the soft mod mistakes occur. But let's back up a bit and just look at this motherboard, because we want to talk about some crazy things here. This is the original Xbox motherboard. And you can see here that we have tiny little 16 megabyte SRAM things and 64, so we have 4 of them. They're hiding around here. But we also have the EEPROM, which I want to call out is kind of what makes your Xbox unique. It's just kind of serial numbers, build date, manufacture date. It's something that makes all Xboxes unique to themselves. And then when we wanted to start installing mod chips, we could have some really cool tricks here on how to just easily install. So let me go back to show you the difference here. You can see right here, kind of right above this 1 meg flash here, is right below it. You can see right there in the bottom left. Right below it, you see all these little pins. This is actually called like the LPC port, where during manufacturing, you're basically plugged in the Xbox to write to the firmware or the flash to put in kind of the operating system. Not really, it would be boot code, etc. But Microsoft left all this completely valid to use. So what you could do is just trick it. You just kind of ground this T0 line, and all of a sudden it thinks it's manufacturing mode. So what do mod chips do? They place their little mod chip on the LPC port, they ground the D0 line, and they put a little couple soldered in lines to control the LEDs, and boom, a mod chip has now taken over. A very strange hardware security model if you can just plug into the manufactured LPC ports. So, what did that give you? Basically a huge level of control that was just creepy. You could now read all your chips, everything, you could control flash gain. It was crazy. You could dump all the information on your console and kind of even switch between kind of firmware on it. So if we knew that we had one, let me go back here to show, we have just kind of one little ROM here. What else if you wanted to try something else, a debug one, whatever you wanted to do? You could, with a mod chip, kind of switch it up. You have all these little banks to put different firmwares on, which was pretty powerful. So then I just slip in one picture here of my Xbox because I think it looks pretty cool. It has a much larger hard drive in it, and it's orange, and a blue jewel. Thought it was pretty cool. Now honestly, 20 years later, I still think it's semi-cool, not as cool as I originally thought, but it's up there. So why do people kind of do this? Like, why buy a mod chip? Why do this? Why change your BIOS? People wanted to do this because you could then put in a debug BIOS. And this is what the developers would use to kind of build games. And a debug BIOS is incredibly powerful because it opens like a secondary network that's always live while you're playing. And this is, of course, for debugging. I'm sure everyone debugs other things, so now you can debug video games. Just open a constant connection. This helped a lot, not only for building things, but kind of reversing things and messing with them. But you know, it also helped build things like Xbox Media Center. And this has been rebranded so many times now, it's now called Kodi. Maybe you've used it, but it kind of really started on Xbox. And it's just a cool way, now your Xbox is a media center. And for people that only wanted to spend 199 bucks, this was a lot better than some of your other alternatives in kind of 2001, 3, 4 for a computer. But now that we're kind of running unsigned code and we can kind of do whatever we want with either a debug dashboard or Xbox Media Center, people just wanted to hack Halo, or at least I did. So we had to find trainers or something that allowed us to cheat, mess with it, and have fun. And that was something called like Yellow by a guy named Xbox 7887. And he built a game trainer, and what that was like a very small, elegant amount of assembly code. I was like, hey, you want to fly around on a map, take screenshots, have some AI? You can do it with this. That allowed you to take some like really elegant looking screenshots, because we're talking about a game that's 20 years ago and it barely runs on 480p. So for you to be able to take a couple hundred screenshots, stitch them together, and make a pretty high quality screenshot, I think was really amazing. So yeah, I took a random mod that a guy made, I flew out and did a panoramic shot and stitched together a couple hundred photos and made an overshot of a map. I guess that doesn't look too great from back from here, but that was the idea. So then why do people mod Halo? Like, what was the point of this? I think a lot of people loved kind of just doing dumb things, driving around on a racetrack, porting maps from Campaign, introducing a bunch of weird models, or putting Mario stuff in Halo. Like, I don't know why a lot of these existed, but they did. So I thought, because as all these mods came out, I was like, oh, people would have to have all these maps together. So I set out and just built a map pack, faked it with a weird kind of cover art, and I packed together 90 mods that people made, and made a really cool map pack to share with folks. And now everyone was modding Halo with soft mods. They could do this in probably under an hour, and everyone was sitting on, the fake Xbox Live or Xbox Connect, playing mods. It's pretty fun. But at this point, I was still playing soccer at that point in my life, and I had a soccer tournament coming up. So I thought I was going to prank one of my teammates and put his face on a Halo map, and then we played it when we showed up at the hotel. So that was fun, too. Got to just mess around with some basic bitmap injects and prank a friend. So then why did this modding sort of explode, and what was so crazy about it, and why were so many people doing it? And I think this is because all of our research was open. The internet in 2003, 4, 5 was pretty different than it is now. It was much more about giving open research, and forums were everywhere. What's kind of more in Twitter, Slack, Discord now was a forum 20 years ago. And everything was free. And this will make much sense much more later, but now a lot of things are gated by payment walls and donations and more, and things were just much more available. So then why was the Xbox so hackable? And this is where we're going to get a bit technical. Bert and Ernie found some really cool exploits in the dashboard, because when it booted up, the Xbox, when you had no disk in it, went to like a green menu. Just a really boring screen that allowed you to look at how much disk space you had left and save games, and that was about it. I think you could play music too. So what Bert and Ernie kind of found out is, the Xbox boots up, it checks to make sure all my images are out. Yep, that's right, it does. It boots up and checks to make sure all my text is out. Yep, it does. But it boots up and doesn't look at the fonts. Okay, that's done. So yeah, let's have some malformed fonts in here. And boom, that's how the Xbox was kind of really hacked. So then Microsoft was like, okay, I see what happened here. You guys are putting bad fonts in here. They're gonna say, okay, you can't boot this specific file because you don't need to. An Xbox can boot into a game. It can boot into its own dashboard. You don't have to touch these update files. And they kept patching files, and Xbox kind of researchers kept finding another file the dashboard used to kind of hold as an entry point. And at one point they hit this one file, the dash update. Because when the original Xbox came out, not all Xboxes had Xbox Live. So how did you get Xbox Live? You basically put in a game that said Xbox Live enabled on the outside of it, and it had the update for Xbox Live on it. So Microsoft could never disable this one file, -update, because then they would brick all these consoles out here that never got Xbox Live. So at this point, Microsoft kind of lost a war. They could no longer patch this Bert and Ernie because they couldn't stop this -update file, which is pretty crazy. But they didn't give up yet. So while we were talking about that chip we saw, that little MCPX chip by NVIDIA, is what a researcher noticed is when the Xbox booted up, it actually copied its kind of boot firmware to memory and other places. But what was weird about this is it wasn't a one-to-one copy, so it's already there in memory. And what was there was an older version of the firmware, and it was in RC5, which is very odd because this doesn't make much sense right now. But think about 20-something years ago, 25 years ago, RC5 wasn't even out yet. It wasn't even validated, it wasn't even talked about. So they had a version of a good standard above RC4 that wasn't even yet out in their firmware. Presumably they removed it because it wasn't verified and great, and they fell back to RC4. Unfortunately, RC4 is not the best at all, for one reason, is if you were to change a string and hash it with RC4, and hash another string with RC4, and you're only looking at the final few bytes of your hash, those will not change if you change a string. It doesn't have the feedback, to change the entire string for one character change. And the Xbox thought your check could be really good of only looking at the last few characters of your hash to make sure it was safe to boot. So when they downgraded RC4, they didn't realize the security implication, so folks could change their firmware in just a weird way that's still perfectly validated from the Xbox. So Microsoft was like, holy cow, this is bad, because they had just released the Xbox and it was already broken. So they trashed all their chips, and they rebuilt all internally into a 1.1 chip. I don't know how expensive this was, but all new hardware versions started rolling out pretty soon after the original. And what I'm imagining Microsoft did as they looked at this RC4 kind of dilemma here is I'm guessing they Googled what is a small encryption algorithm. Because they had a very small amount of space left in kind of their firmware to kind of encrypt stuff, because they realized a hash wasn't going to work. So I'm guessing here that they Googled, and Google was even this a while back then, is a small encryption algorithm, which landed them on T, or a tiny encryption algorithm. Unfortunately, I don't think they read it too long because it clearly states it's not the best for cryptography. Cryptographic operations. So yeah, they picked T, and T is not good. Because unfortunately for T, much like RC4, if you change things in certain areas, you can't use it as a hashing algorithm because it does not change. Like using things that are used for encryption are not good for using things that are meant as a hash, and probably vice versa there. So yes, they made a mistake again. So at this point, after thrashing all these chips and tossing them to make new ones, they realized they can't do it again. So T was still there. So they kind of went really quick without thinking and messed up again. And then we kind of talked about it already, but these LPC ports, you can just connect to the hardware. Why not disable them at a hardware level after manufacturing? Don't know, they never did it. And this is where we're gonna get pretty technical, because this is so interesting to me. Is some really early kind of computers, way when they started, had this wraparound feature. And what I mean by that is when you're referencing memory and you hit the very beginning or end, it wraps around to the beginning or end from wherever you are. They just go in a circle, which that seems really weird for a computer, but some really early computers that only had a meg to a RAM wanted to do that. So, well, also I'm gonna jump into this 820 It's kind of related to wrapping around, but I want to show you what I mean here with a little example. So this might be tough, there's a lot of boxes up here, it looks pretty crazy. But imagine you have a 16-bit processor, which gives you about 20 bits of physical space. If you see that little pink line on the bottom, the Intel 888, I was unfortunately not born when this was out, but maybe some of you were, I do not know. But the Intel 888 had 1 meg of kind of memory you could reference.
That was a lot.
That was quite a lot back then, yeah. So what you could do is when this new Intel came out, the Intel 8286, is it came out and it had more than a meg of RAM, which was crazy. Because back then, people weren't doing like what we have now with virtual memory. It was just your physical memory. Application Photoshop said, okay, I'll stay in the first 10 bits of memory, you stay in the next 20 bits. It's kind of how things worked. And that was really odd. So as more memory came out with more CPUs and kind of larger ones, all the kind of programs that were built on the original 888, they had some issues because they were trying to reference memory that was either in use or not in use. It was like very odd. So so Intel here with their new CPU came out with this little trick, and this is what I want to talk about, which is kind of weird, is they have this A20 gate, and they knew this would be the first kind of bit that was after what the Intel 880 had. So what they could do with this is throw this on or off, and it would no longer be 1 if needed. So what this meant is, let's say you're trying to reference at the exact 1 megabit of memory on a chip. It would become this weird massive binary number you see here, 100, whatever. It cannot be rendered here because the 1 lands on the 820 line. But if you're using kind of a modern CPU that is trying to trick itself into acting like a legacy CPU, like the Intel 888, you can throw that 820 gate, which throws it to 0. So now your memory location, if you request for the memory at the exact 1 meg location, you're actually getting memory at the 0 meg location, which is very weird. That's kind of part of the wraparound I mentioned, and what the 820 gate can do. So you can see here, sorry, I didn't explain like this F800, that was just like how you translated addresses. Because it was a way to kind of say like, hey, here's my segment, here's my shift, let's offset from our location to get a physical address in memory. So I hope you see kind of where I'm going here. Because as CPUs came out, they never removed this 820 gate. And we're talking 10 years later. So 20 years now, the Xbox comes out, and they still had this 820 gate. So what happened, and this is pretty crazy, is kind of researchers for Xbox were like, holy cow, what happens if I throw the 820 gate off? When the Xbox booted then, instead of it booting in this very secure enclave of this read-only ROM, it booted a mega memory earlier. And what's crazy about that is the ROM was still on and functioning. So hackers could just boot this system on a different part of memory where it was readable and writable in code you control, and you could read it, the entire secret ROM that the system was booting. And the actual people that figured this out didn't actually tell Microsoft about this until like 3 years after the whole incident. And they never figured this one out, which is very odd. But the reason why this happened is it wasn't on one of these slides, is because Microsoft was starting as like an AMD Xbox. And they switched to Intel pretty late in the game. I think they probably missed some things on how these chips are architected, because AMD started later. They didn't have this weird backwards legacy behavior. They didn't have that. But when they swapped to Intel, they never did a double check, and it did. So this is called the 820 kind of hack gate, and that was kind of the main reason that a lot of original Xbox stuff were hacked, which I think is pretty crazy. So then that kind of ends our journey in Xbox One. We're gonna jump into the 360. So once again, instead of my orange Xbox, now you have to look at a bunch of other Xboxes. Yeah, a nerd, a bunch of Halo Xboxes, and a bunch of banned ones, and that was my fun. So what kind of happened in the 360 is we saw the Xbox team that we kind of talked about for the original Xbox. They're like, okay, we're rebranded. We're no longer the Xbox Linux team. We're going to be called the 360 team. And they're like, we're all out here. We're about legal loading of backwards compatibility for games. We want to emulate all the old stuff. We're doing nothing illegal. We just want to have some fun with the 360. And they're like, this is going to be amazing. The new console, let's figure out how it works. Let's hack it. Let's have some fun. But unfortunately, no one could really play the Xbox because it just red-ringed and had issues all the time. Maybe you have them. Maybe this was something you experienced, but RROD really stood for the red ring of death. And if you got this, chances are your Xbox was ruined. It was such a bad deal that kind of Ballmer at this time in this position was like, okay, let's do it. And he approved a quite expensive, basically recall of all the 360s and gave people a 3-year plan to turn them back in for new ones. And this caused, even though the console had just come out, a huge quick iteration of motherboards that were kind of code-named. So the very first one was a Xenon, and it kind of had this real bad ring of death situation. It was basically because it was just heating so much during gameplay that it would warp your pins of your CPU fan off the board. It would break connection, and then it could no longer dissipate heat and broke. So they're like, okay, we're gonna come up with some cool code names here. Honestly, don't know how they come up with these. And they kept releasing iterations, all trying to fix this issue that were continually plaguing Xboxes from getting too hot. People were putting their Xboxes in ovens and wrapped in towels, trying to fix this. But Microsoft eventually did get it. They kind of kept reiterating on boards, and then of course introducing down here at the bottom an entire new kind of physical console, the Slim Knee. But now let's just kind of look at how they evolved when they built this 360. Is they decided that they've learned all their mistakes from the original, and this was a crazy chain of trust when booting. So this time, when you kind of boot the 360, it starts kind of in first bootloader in a read-only memory of a ROM. And it is a very small piece of code that all it does is double check that it can trust the next layer with a very small amount of code, because all it's trying to do is trust the next layer that has more memory and more capability. So it's like, okay, 2BL, are you ready to run? Because I have to make sure you're trusted. And it's like, yeah, okay, I am. And when the second bootloader is like, okay, let me take my CPU key out of cold storage, let me prepare to start encrypting things. Do I trust the next bootloader? And it's like 4BL at this point, or CD. And it just goes and goes checking. All it's trying to do is until it's ready to give control to a hypervisor, or kind of what you have now, kind of just like a root mode or anything. And it does this, and it's crazy. It checks, it goes through all these bootloaders one by one until it's ready to boot your Xbox. But what they did, and this decrypts patches point, is because they knew they couldn't patch their ROM because it was read-only at this point, unlike the Xbox, is they applied patches dynamically once the system booted just on top of the ROM. So that was an entire bootloader. I mean, part of the chain of trust was just dedicated to applying patches, which allowed you to kind of boot a patched kernel or device no matter how often they needed to patch it. But then they thought, how can we make the motherboard kind of more secure? So they introduced what was called like a hardware level AES 128 between all these chips, which was actually pretty crazy to hear at the time, of a hardware level encryption of AES between your CPU, your RAM, and your SRAM. So now you couldn't even sniff things in transport. You couldn't hook onto things because they're all encrypted with a device key based on time and your CPU key that it's assigned at boot. So it was a way step above than anything the original Xbox was. And even then, they even took it further, is they introduced a little IBM thing called eFuses, which were kind of really unheard of at the time to be in a video game console, and they kind of used them for purposes that I don't think they were intended for. And now a lot of people use them for this purpose. These were hardware level fuses. And what I mean by that is when you blow this with an electrical charge, there's no going back. It's one and done. So what they did by this is they could burn into your console at the hardware level, never be undone, whether it was developer one or not. They could blow in your CPU key, what bootloaders it should trust. And at the very bottom here, they reserved a ton of bits just to say what dashboard number you were on. And they did this so you couldn't downgrade. Your Xbox would refuse to boot if it wasn't on a dashboard that it had already updated to. So what I mean by that is you couldn't downgrade. This was a huge problem in the original Xbox because what did you do when a dashboard was patched? You just had an exploit that installed an older version of the dashboard and then exploited it. It was very easy. So at this point, now we have some really crazy security of like onboard AES encryption. We have some crazy IBM eFuses technology. And then we have to look at the disks that were actually put in the Xbox. Now there was this huge layer of just security too in the game disks that the 360 used. And these were like amounts of security that your DVD key was derived from your CPU key. This is all in like very secure root stores. And then they even tricked DVD players. They put a fake table of contents in the games that said, hey, you're gonna put this in Xbox. Which is crazy to me that they thought of just the possibility that someone would take an Xbox game and put it in a DVD player. And it told you, put it in Xbox. And then what they did too, is they had introduced security sectors, which means if you were trying to be funny and copy your Xbox disc to pass it to a friend, while your programs probably would reject that for a variety of DRM reasons, if you somehow got past this, they intentionally put blocks in the game disk that were invalid, intentionally null, that a normal disk copying software would fill. And when you put those in, this little like handshake or challenge took place. And if you put in an invalid disk, it was like failed security sector, and you're done. Which was a pretty crazy technique to do to really prevent piracy. And then what they did too is they introduced the third iteration of game disk. And what this did too is if you ever turn a burnt CD around, you can notice with just visually how far it burned into the disk by just visually looking at it. It's not too hard, you can kind of see. And what they did is they burned into the game disk way more further than you're allowed to kind of do safely, so they could extend another gig or two to try and compete with Blu-ray. So that is where that disc came from, where that was on top of my Xbox stack of like larger discs that were still on dual layer kind of DVDs that try to compete with Blu-ray. They didn't really work out in theory, they didn't go mainstream, but that was their idea. So looking at this, like security is so much tougher now. Well, things are more difficult. So kits became the way to do things. And what are kits? Like, it's such a weird thing to say kits, but these were Xboxes that were either delivered as like test or demo kits to people, or dev kits for developers, or stress kits for performance. And these were Xboxes that were in developer mode. And that was crazy, because they naturally ran unsigned code and could do everything you wanted without hacking it. So I was like, great, how do I get one of these? Unfortunately, you can't just say, hey, Microsoft, I'm a fake developer, can I have a dev kit? It's not how it worked. So this entered where I think money started really entering the picture of just modding Xboxes. If you had to obtain some pretty on-the-line legal-wise kits that were not something you can just buy at a store, and people really upped the charge on these, is they range anywhere from, like, you can see this XNA Blue kit, which had been kind of claimed in the community as being the coolest looking Xbox, went for about $2,000, which is crazy for a developer kit. And then two, what is legal about this? Because if I pay a guy in Canada to send me an Xbox that he claims is a test kit, am I in trouble? I don't know. They're not you're only supposed to have these if you're a developer. So like, what was the kind of barrier of entry for modding now if you had to go into some pretty kind of sketchy areas of the internet to even mod? But for good news, like the researchers out there are like, I know, we need to do something else. So they started researching and they found this King Kong game, which was a crazy game because they never encrypted any of their game kind of contents or files on disk. And this is a big deal because people realized with the way the Xbox worked 360 for kind of just performance reasons is you can DMA directly to RAM. DMA is direct memory access. So you can take your shaders for just performance reasons and rendering, and you can ship those directly to RAM without jumping through all the buses and jumps of a CPU and kind of slower processes. That was crazy, because in King Kong, their shaders weren't encrypted. So what some researchers started doing is messing with this King Kong game and putting in kind of really malformed shaders to kind of trick the Xbox into running unsigned code. And sure enough, that actually worked. And that was so early in the life cycle of the 360 that we saw why we ended up learning about the eFuses and more. Is Microsoft released a bootloader update pretty early in the history of the 360, and they were like, okay, we understand what went on here. We're now going to add the CPU key to an earlier layer of the bootloader, trying to secure everything. But then what researchers found out when they did this is, okay, let's just zero out all this information. And what I mean by that is, like, you don't have a CPU key yet if your Xbox is still being built. It doesn't exist. So they nulled them out, and the Xbox was like, okay, I guess you're ready for patching. You're not a real Xbox yet. And you could just say, okay, I want to land on a patch that was not yet patched. So not the 1920. Once again, kind of an iteration that we saw on the Xbox, where you could kind of land on a vulnerable dashboard. But anyone who had updated to the 1920 at this point had their eFuse blown and they couldn't downgrade. So it was immediately discovered that, oh, this wasn't really going to work if you had already taken the update. So it was a rough discovery that really quickly patched this King Kong exploit. But don't worry, the researchers kept digging. And they found this JTAG, or this SMC port. And using that same memory exploit that King Kong did, now we could start soldering things together, all just to run an exploit to mess with an unsigned shader, to direct access to memory, to kind of take over the Xbox. So now these next pictures, I apologize, these are me trying to use a digital camera in I think 05, 06, and they are horrible. But I try to solder to my Xbox, build this stuff together, all to kind of run homebrew software on my 360. It ended up working. How I didn't burn my house down or hands, I don't know, soldering with an ether, learning how horrible, very bad. But I don't mind hand. And this is pretty important because this is all the specific keys that make your Xbox your Xbox. This empowers you to kind of sign software, run it on your device. But because only so little people could do this, homebrew for 360 was kind of rough. Like it was like, okay, here's the dashboard. I made a new interface for it. It wasn't that cool. Because honestly, Viper 360, cool, I'm running a homebrew thing that can open up a file manager. Okay, wasn't that sweet. And then what started happening, things weren't too kind of friendly in the community. As everyone shared research, what we ended up seeing is sites were spawning literally just to do what kind of action replay did in Xbox, but for a payment. So now you had to buy a monthly fee if you wanted to use like Horizon Mode or Valhalla, just to edit your save files to put onto your own Xbox that only probably a couple hundred people had. It seemed really weird. It's like everything cost money. And it was getting worse and worse of like, yeah, let me sell you illegal FIFA coins, let me mod your COD lobbies. It just got worse and worse. And I say it escalates further here because there was a group of individuals that continued hacking these games and companies and just figuring out how save games work until they kind of found themselves in Epic and they kind of, Blizzard. And they kind of kept hacking, and then it turns out they hacked like an Apache simulator game, and the government got involved, and it was bad for them. Most of them all went to prison. So it wasn't great. Just hacking game saves ended up for a few, just not ending well. But for most people out there that weren't doing this, they were in luck because there was like a new way to hack your Xbox on the horizon. And it was called the RGH, or Reset Glitch Hack. And this worked for any of the fat Xboxes before they became, the Slim and the E. And this was the same type of exploit, but it worked at a weirdly complex level, where it intentionally slowed down the CPU. And they did this so it wouldn't boot into a red ring of death, which would basically stop that process, and send it like impulses at an electrical level, which would trick the bootloader to load into a different one that you control. I have no electrical engineering knowledge there, so how that actually works at the bits and zeros, no idea, but that was a crazy exploit. Because now, you could just buy this little piece of hardware, and it costs like 20 bucks, 10 bucks, plug it into your Xbox, you would mess with some electrical impulses, and boom, your 360 was now yours to run homebrew. So Microsoft did not like this. Unfortunately, it did take them a while to fix this. Is by the time this little Slim and this E Xbox came out, this E one, is they had realized all the reasons that caused the Reset Glitch Hack to work. Is they basically built a more kind of filtered piece of hardware that could filter out external disturbances. So you can't send messages to kind of trick it into different layers. So the Reset Glitch Hack was dead, but it took them 30 years. So if you were trying to hack your 360, chances are you use the RGH way, which kind of reigned supreme for a good solid amount of years. And then what happened though, is at one point, the third iteration of RGH came out. And this was a big deal because people were like, hey, you don't have to go to Team Executor and spend 20 bucks anymore. Just solder these wires together and you're good to go. And people kind of figured out that you could connect to these specific post signals and kind of messaging and do all these things at a very tiny level, and then all of a sudden you could run unsigned code. Very strange how it all works out. But as Microsoft had already found that out, they had really hammered to be a very bulletproof solution and built kind of this Winchester E model. So then with all this modding, like why were people doing this? Why were people hacking 360s and all this effort when all they wanted to do was kind of drive around in a truck in Halo? Like it seems pretty dumb. But that's what people did. Like these mods were not as crazy as the last in Halo 2, but people wanted to mess around and like for some reason build a little boat to drive around. Why? I don't know again, like this stuff wasn't exactly that universally cool or kind of in comparison to the previous Halos, but it was okay. But what we saw in the 360 is people were more obsessed with kind of updating game types and things. Because we noticed as the Halos came out, more and more kind of logic lied in the game type to kind of control the modes of it. So people were like, oh, I don't care about map modding anymore, I'm all about the game types. And using this kind of megalo script, which is just like a higher iteration of JavaScript for kind of logic. And that was okay, but who wants to really do that? It doesn't have the same kind of vibe that kind of Halo 2 modding did. And I think a lot of people thought a lot like I did just there, because honestly, kits were expensive, the hacks were very complicated, everything was gated behind money, and you could see that Halo 2, if I just looked at a random forum, it had 120,000 posts, Halo 3, 25,000, and then Halo Reach, 5,000. Like, the community dwindled with every Halo release. So sadly, it was just time to move on. Because Bungie left Halo behind. They ended up leaving to go make Destiny. Newer consoles are patching vulnerabilities extremely quick, and they are preventing downgrades. E-fuses are blowing, dashboards are coming out. The site where all the hackers were kind of grouping up on Halo mods, the guy was in college and was like, okay, I'm out of college, this isn't fun anymore. Sold the site to someone else, and they weren't the coolest person. And it fell apart. As I said, a few really hacked too many things and found themselves in prison, and that wasn't the best. And some people were just way too toxic. And I think this really just collapsed the kind of hacking community. And to even drive that point even further, it got really dark at some point in the 360 world, as people were stealing Gears of War 3 before it came out off PartnerNet. PartnerNet is the developer Xbox Live. People were using a Key Vault service. In Key Vault, I talked about EEPROM. That's in your original Xbox, what made your Xbox unique to you. In the 360, that became the Key Vault, what made your Xbox you. So people found a way to kind of produce these Key Vaults programmatically and sell them. It became really kind of sketchy, of like getting online and getting banned, buying a new Key Vault, getting back online. But then something happened that was so extremely weird that I had to make a note of it, is this barn video. Is some friends of mine decided that they were going to take Halo off of PartnerNet while it's still in development, record a video of themselves playing it, really make the footage extremely tough to watch, film it in a barn, shake the camera so much, blast music on it that is so loud and obnoxious that you can't understand it, and leak it to the internet. This actually blew up. It went pretty crazy because someone was actually playing Halo 3 about a year before it came out. And there were a few of us all playing it. And it was insane how big a dumb video of someone playing Halo in a barn went. But that was pretty crazy. So then like a tiny recap here is like, the 360 was crazy. It had all these E-fuses and IBM technology that was kind of unheard of. It had all this RSA across the platform with AES as well. It kept introducing bootloader updates that kind of just blew out everything you thought you knew because of the stage patch approach of the game, of the console. And then they introduced these third iteration game disks that had a huge amount of security from the others. In every single file in the 360, unlike what we saw with the Xbox, that you could kind of just run runnable saves or not, is they introduced things for like Xbox Live content, specific content contained in your Xbox, Pierce containers, all these containers that were just secured, hashed, encrypted, etc., and much more to work with. But don't worry, we had saw that, holy cow, Halo MCC, the Master Chief Collection is coming out. All the Halos were coming back. So that someone who was modding them for 20 years was like, great, let's mod them again. Let's have some fun. Let's hack some Halo. But unfortunately, this game kind of sucked. It never really worked at all. It took them about 1,200 days to fix it, which is pretty sad. But there was hope. After all the kind of stress and pain of everyone hiding things behind payment walls and trying to contain knowledge, is people started moving to GitHub. They were like, sweet, let's share our research on Bland, which was the engine for Halo, and kind of make it an open tool and attract contributors. And that was great. It was a good shout out to kind of how the community started and why people hacked consoles. And it's still open source and still going strong today for all the new Halos. And then I always have to take a stab at the PS3 because whatever happened to the Xbox, at least it wasn't them, the PS3 style. Because the PS3 was kind of destroyed very quickly by one individual. Found all the keys so you could run unsigned code. Then they were sued though, GeoHot and his group, and it was kind of the worst way to handle hackers on your console. So hackers in return basically DDoS PSN for weeks and it stayed offline. So I'd say for at least everything Microsoft did, it never got as bad as what Sony was doing with the PS3. So yeah, we kind of blew through that, but that was a quick jump through all my Halo hacking through 2 consoles. So thank you, thank you.
If you want to do Q&A, you can.
Oh yeah, I guess if anyone has any questions, hit me.
Any questions?
Researchers just in the general public, are they professionals?
Yeah, it was weird because 2 of the main researchers, a guy was named Bunny, he was at MIT, he was a hardware engineer. He was obviously very smart and really good. Another guy, Michael Steele, I don't exactly remember, he was Germany, I think. And he was another guy, I think just out of college, very smart. But the rest of them at my time, I think I was 10, 11 years old, were just a bunch of kids messing around. So like, the knowledge, the years, it was way different between everyone. But a lot of professionals that I think this was just a second nature to.
So Microsoft is just a game of cat and mouse.
Yeah.
Never pissed off the community. Kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, they pissed off a few, but they also kept making interesting challenges.
It was like fair game
Yeah.
as opposed to silly.
Did you break any beyond repair?
No.
That's a bad one. Like, so that red ring of death is where you really, so you never got a red ring of death?
No, I did, but I think mine was from overuse of plane, not necessarily because. Yeah. Because if I was banned, I got a few bans. Like the red ring of death was like the red 3, but if you were banned hardware-wise, it was like a solid red. So there's hardware bans that could go out. So I got those a few times, but I think only one where it was just from overplay.
You got a warranty in place on that?
No, I actually, funny enough, got a ban that I think isn't documented that a few of us got in the community. It was called like a revocation ban, which took all devices that your account had signed into and hardware banned them, and all the accounts that were signed into your Xbox got banned. So I banned my roommate, his brother, my brother, all the Xboxes I've interacted with on one end of it.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of people do not like me. But,
Any other questions? All right, a big round of applause for John. That was a great talk, man. Thank you. All right, yeah, so we'll jump on some lightning talks here, but that was a fantastic presentation. And I have a large collection of jailbroken and modern consoles because it's just so cool. It's like every time these things come out, it's kind of like a global CTF, if you will, of just people, I don't know, trying to pull one over on like the large corporations, if you will. But yeah, so I think the next lightning talk that we've got, where did he go?
He's right here.
He's right here?
Me.
I'll hand it to Vincent for the introduction.
Yeah, so this is my friend George. He actually drove all the way from Orlando to give this talk. And it's actually a very interesting talk.